Julian Assange is the editor-in-chief of WikiLeaks, the whistleblowing website responsible for publication of the Iraq and Afghanistan war logs and the US Embassy cables. Here he speaks to the Belfast Telegraph and the Irish Independent.
Julian, ahead of the publication of the Ireland cables, we've seen the release of tranches from different media partners from across the globe, most recently from Canada and for example from India and Pakistan recently. Just on a general sense, what impact are the latest releases having?
In India, we saw the Indian Parliament walk out 8 times, over 30 front pages of the Hindu since March 17. Similarly, we can look to our work in Central America, looking at what has happened in Guatemala and Honduras. 60% of the GDP of Guatemala, the US Embassy now alleges is being controlled by narco cartels who are building a corridor of land from Mexico down into Guatemala City for their drug operations. We've seen extensive input into the elections in Peru. The Arab Spring, people should be aware of what happened there with Tunisia and so on. Tajikistan has started publishing, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan. So really, if we look at if just isolated to the cables, the role of the State Department in the world, in its operations in every country, and its dealings with multinationals, local politics, geopolitical concerns, intelligence concerns, then this material covers all of that. And so when it is revealed, it affects all of those sectors.
And just as this unfolds around the world, Julian, what about the relationship with the United States? I mean, has it changed in the last number of months? Are they still seem so determined to really hunt you, I guess is the word I'm looking for, to chase after you?
Well, the United States has brought out to the public an extremely aggressive response. In private, it is also doing other things. That response has been the most aggressive response to an international publisher ever. Arguably, if we look at its responses to domestic publishers, it's been the most severe response since the McCarthyist era of the early 1950s. The United States is engaging in a secret grand jury process, information of which has come out and been publicly confirmed in Alexandria, Virginia. Just a week ago, people were hauled before that process. Our people or people supporting us when crossing the United States border are detained and searched routinely. There is now an active lawsuit involving ACLU against that sort of activity. There has been pressure on many different countries individually by the United States to take action against us. That pressure on Australia, for instance, resulted in the Australian government publicly announcing that it would suspend my passport, that it would start a whole of government task force into us involving domestic intelligence agency, the foreign intelligence agency, the Australian Federal Police, the Australian Defence Department and the Attorney General's Office. A prospective asylum application in Switzerland on my behalf had the US ambassador to Switzerland threatened the Swiss government to not accept such an application. Now, the sort of public rhetoric that you saw by the Vice President in the beginning of the year saying that I was a high-tech terrorist, this has been toned down a little bit. I think there is a perception that the public rhetoric went too far, but under the surface these investigations continue.
Mm-hmm. Julie, more specifically relating to Ireland, what's your reaction to the release of the Ireland cables, and what do you think that it tells us about the nature of Ireland's relationship with the US?
Well, my reaction is I'm extremely pleased based upon the work that I've seen the Irish Independent do so far on the Belfast Telegraph. It's a lot of very interesting information is coming out. I would say that the type of information, while it is of course unique to Irish conditions, is exactly the same sort of thing that we saw in Australia, that we saw in El Salvador, which is the US Embassy being used to collect political intelligence and economic intelligence on the country that it's operating in. Now, it's not always anti-US. It doesn't always reflect negatively on the US, what is occurring. Sometimes that is just information they are collecting without necessarily intending to use it for a nefarious purpose, but it throws light onto the domestic situation, to infighting and to a dissonance between what particular individuals or particular companies or particular politicians are saying to the public and what they're saying to the United States.
And specifically about Northern Ireland, I mean, the cables revealed a lot of previously unknown details about the peace process and about the political process that's still ongoing. What are your thoughts on that as regards maybe the public's right to know these things?
It is clearly now the public's right to know. You can make some debate that during the very heat of negotiations, is it helpful for information to be coming out, because then there's two sorts of negotiations you have to have at once. The negotiation with the public and the negotiation with your partners before you've come up with an idea to present to the public. But those days are long gone. The CIA has refused in the last month to declassify information about the Bay of Pigs invasion in 1962. I mean, they maintain that that is still something that the public should not know. And of course, that is completely and utterly ridiculous. There is no possible security ramifications that concerned what happened in 1962 to the present situation. So that excuse of saying that this stuff should be concealed for security reasons is a lie that is being constantly used to cover up the embarrassment to the organisations concerned.
What are your views on the methods used by the US to extract sensitive detail from countries across the world? The Ireland cables do not appear to show any direct evidence of spying or illegal surveillance, but there is also evidence of snooping on friendly powers such as Ireland. What are your views on the methods that they use, and also do they cross the diplomatic boundaries?
Yeah. Well, from other material, we know that they cross the diplomatic boundaries. I mean, there was several orders by the State Department with Hillary Clinton's name on them to US diplomats to collect DNA evidence from people in the United Nations and from non-governmental organizations working in South America, credit card numbers, frequent flyer numbers, passwords to VPNs, encrypted links and so on. Now, the majority of the cables don't contain information of that type. And that is because these are not the top secret cables. Now, they are highly classified, but they are not the most secret. So espionage, as we routinely know it, is preserved for these most secret things, but we sometimes see a shadow of it. And in Ireland, the shadow that we see is the collecting of political intelligence through human sources. But these other cases, we see a shadow of the vast national security agency operations, which is to collect electronic intelligence by hacking into national governments' computer systems and non-governmental organizations' computer systems, and conducting bulk telephone spying and so on. This collecting of information from human sources is something that we saw in Australia, for instance, exactly the same as in Northern Ireland.